Hola, I'm Jorge Ramos.
And I'm Paola Ramos.
And this is The Moment. Well, Paola, today we have a conversation with Tucker Carlson, who used to work for Fox News, who created later an independent network, and who has a following of more than 34 million people online. He's an advocate of President Donald Trump, but recently he broke with him because of the Iran war.
Look, I think Tucker Carlson perfectly represents the moment we're in, Dad, right? He's a former anchor turned independent media voice. He's a fervent Trump supporter that has also expressed a lot of skepticism when it comes to the war in Gaza and in Iran. But I think what's interesting is that at his core, what you will find in this conversation is that Tucker Carlson is still regurgitating many of the same mis and disinformation that led to Donald Trump's rise. And I'm talking about the big lie and also the great replacement theory. And so, of course, you may be wondering why talk to Tucker Carlson or why expose him here. Well, Tucker Carlson has Donald Trump's ear. And so we want to know what Carlson tells the most powerful person in this country, as well as his millions of followers every single day.
So remember to catch this episode on our YouTube channel, and we are also on Instagram, at The Moment, Ramos Pop.
Today on The Moment, one of the leading voices on Trumpism explains why he's no longer with the movement.
So, Tucker, I was remembering the last time we spoke, it was 8 years ago. We were obviously debating about immigration. And you were at Fox News. I was also on television. And you were very powerful. And not only very powerful, but also very close to President Trump. And of course, the media landscape has changed. Now I'm an independent journalist. You created your own network, which I was checking, with more than 34 million followers in all your platforms. But recently you said, and I want to use the quote, you said, you're not going to play along with the lies anymore. So how does it feel to be fully independent now? What can you say now that you couldn't say before? I wonder if being so close to power was like a drug.
Well, I'm actually glad to get away from power. I would say I have a lot of disadvantages, and I've made a lot of mistakes and done a lot of bad things in my life. But one thing I've never done is loved being around power. I don't like it. I never have liked it. I would say that looking back, think there were probably a lot of things that I should have said that I didn't. And I would only say, and this is not exculpatory, this is in fact embarrassing, but I don't think I understood how many thoughts I was not allowing myself to have because I worked at this big company. And I think a lot of self-censorship works that way. If you'd given me a lie detector test 8 years ago and said, what are the things you'd like to say but can't, I would have said, honestly, really not many. But looking back, I think I censored myself. I didn't allow myself to think certain things because of the job that I have and had, and I'm embarrassed about that. I'm just now starting to realize it. So yeah, no, I feel much happier. I have less power. I make less money, but I'm much happier.
But the censoring had to do with Trump. In other words, since you were so close to him and you went to the White House, I mean, you were not even 50 and you were already giving advice to the president. Did it feel like, no, you cannot talk bad about Trump?
Oh, no. I mean, I'm still giving advice to the president constantly. I don't think he hears it or cares. But I will never stop giving advice to our leaders ever. I feel like that's my job, is to say what I think is true and try to encourage other people to agree with me. I'm making a case, and I made it to Trump for the entirety of our of the last 10 years. And I made it up until February 28th when he launched this war against Iran. And I just thought, that's too much. I can't handle it. But I pushed him on foreign policy questions, particularly for, a decade. And it turned out I actually had a lot less influence than I thought I had, which is probably a good thing to realize about yourself. I was shocked. I couldn't believe, I felt I had reason on my side and of some knowledge, and it didn't matter, but whatever, that's past. But I will always give advice for whatever it's worth, usually not much, to everyone in power, whether I know or like them or not.
You say that speaking of Iran, that the president isn't necessarily listening to your advice, which I think is obvious given the state of play. At the time of this recording, just a couple of minutes ago, the president, during this G7 summit in France, was actually asked about the Iranian school bombing. And he said, and I'm quoting him, he said, "Mistakes are made." And I think you have been incredibly vocal, Tucker, about this war in Iran. And I'm going to quote you. You said that even to start the war with Iran was, quote, the most foolish thing any American president has ever done. And you also said that, quote, that this war will destroy President Trump. No? But I think a lot of our followers have also seen you sort of support President Trump in different ways throughout the last decade. Now, whether it was through his sexual abuse convictions or zero tolerance policy or January 6th, claims of a stolen election. So I think the question that I have is why was this your breaking point?
Well, because it's by far the most profound decision he's made, because it has the longest reaching consequences. It's a matter of historical significance, I think. This is the beginning of the end of an entire period in American history and world history. And I think that's very obvious now. But I also was offended by the way in which the decision was made, which was by ceding leadership to a foreign country, and one of the worst foreign countries, I would say. But even if it was a great foreign country, I would disagree with that, because I mean the United States president has to have the ability to act on behalf of his own country. You have to have sovereignty, or else all of this is fake. This pretense of democracy that we have, that I like and believe in. But yeah, no, I mean, I didn't just defend Trump. I campaigned for Trump. I spoke at the Republican National Convention. I voted for Trump, which I don't vote very often, but I did vote for him in this last election. And I was absolutely all in. In my calculation, I was wrong, of course. But from my perspective, I'll just tell you exactly why I did that. He was under such attack from permanent Washington, from the bipartisan Republican and Democratic Party, who share the same economic views and neoliberal economics, which I despise, and neoconservative foreign policy, which I despise even more. And they were all against Trump. And so to me, that was, and they tried to put him in prison. And so to me, that was proof that he was their enemy. And, we need to have pushback against the uniparty. It's the most important thing we can do if we're going to save the country. And so I was shocked when he wound up having the same politics fundamentally as Chuck Schumer, which he does. And that was a huge surprise to me.
Do you feel like he lied to you? I mean, in sort of the conversations that you had with the president leading to this decision to intervene in Iran, do you personally feel like you were lied to?
I don't know. That's too easy. That lets me off the hook too much. I mean, I probably lied to myself. I'm sure I did, just like I did at Fox News, where I sort of I've never addressed Israel at Fox News. I didn't care that much about Israel, but I also felt like, is it worth it? Probably not. I've got all kinds of other priorities. So I did self-censor on that. And I think I was so close to Trump, and I like Trump. I've always liked Trump, like personally. I like him now, that I just kind of didn't allow myself to believe certain things. But it's also true that Trump has said things in the past 110 days that I've never heard him say before. Attitudes I did not know he had. Like, I do think he changed. And if you ask anyone who's known him a long time, this is a new iteration of Trump. Now, how did we get here? I don't have the answer. There are some pretty distressing clues going back to the Butler assassination attempt, but I don't have proof that any of them are true. But he changed. There's no doubt he changed.
One of the things you keep talking about is this idea of self-censorship, which I think I think my father and I are seeing it among some of our own colleagues and in different institutions.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that I believe is attracting so many perhaps new followers to you is that they feel that you're not censored anymore. And I think even yesterday, when I was hearing your show and you were talking about Gaza, and those that are still to this day sort of supporting the intervention in Gaza, I think you said something that really caught my attention. You said those who support that, you said they will be punished for what they've done. Everyone knows what they've done. And anyone who defends it will be diminished at best, punished at worst, as anyone who defended the Nazis was in the end.
Yes.
I mean,
That's right.
Very strong words. And as I was hearing you, Tucker, I was thinking about Mahmoud Kamil. because we interviewed him in our podcast, and obviously you know his story. But I was thinking about him and other international students that have also been outspoken about Gaza, that have then in turn been sort of persecuted, detained, arrested, even deported by this administration. And I wanted to ask you in that moment, as you were saying, that if you think that this administration has unfairly sort of punished or treated others that have been outspoken, in many ways essentially doing the same thing that you're doing. Honestly, that's what I was thinking about yesterday. You do?
Yes, of course. And that's something else that I regret not saying something about. I mean, my excuse is that for the past year and a half, I've been focused, in my personal life and in my professional life, on the war with Iran. I didn't want it. I knew there was enormous pressure starting in January of 2025 to get the United States to follow Israel into this war. So I was like on it. And so that's my excuse. But it's also true that in my peripheral vision, I saw the crackdown on these campus protests. And I was blinded, one, by the fact that I'm not sympathetic to college protests because I don't like college and I don't like college students. I was a college student, and I don't, I just have contempt for that whole world, the self-importance, the dumbness. So I kind of was like, annoying college kids. But then, because they are annoying college kids, but they also have a right to have an opinion on things. And the idea that anti-Semitism is the biggest problem in the Ivy League is like insane, actually. And it's the kind of identity politics that I disliked under Joe Biden, where the U.S. government maintain separate standards for people on the basis of their ethnicity. Like, that's exactly the opposite of what we should have in the United States. And the Trump administration is doing that. So I wish I had focused on it. I wish I had said something. But of course, and by the way, the quote that you read from me the other day is like basically just the New Testament. I mean, Jesus says, in the end, everything will be known. And that is true. And that's true for me and the sins that I've committed and I'm still committing. And that's true for you and your dad and for the people who support the genocide in Gaza. But it is a genocide. It is a genocide. It's not substantively different from any other genocide, maybe in scale, but certainly not in intent. The point is to get rid of a group of people based on their ethnicity, not their religion, their ethnicity, because it's Christians as well as Muslims. So that's wrong when it happens in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon. It's wrong when it happened in Rwanda, when it happened in Armenia, when it happened in Nazi Germany. It's always wrong. I believe in universal standards of behavior. Israel does not. Its defenders do not. But I do. And that's my position. So, by the way, if I ever participate in a genocide, if I ever make excuses for ethnic cleansing, I expect to be held to exactly the same standard as Ben-Gvir and Netanyahu, right?
So let me jump into something different, Tucker, here. You broke with President Trump on Iran, but you didn't on the many occasions when he repeated the big lie that he had won the 2020 election. And here recently in your podcast, you said, "I'm sorry for misleading people. It was not intentional." So first, what was this apology for exactly? I'm not clear. I saw the podcast and I couldn't understand.
Well, I'll tell you, in that, I'll address both questions. So I was speaking specifically of the war in Iran. I said on stage as I campaigned for Trump in public, repeatedly, this is a vote against more Middle Eastern wars that don't help the United States. He just launched a Middle Eastern war that hurts the United States. So I'm sorry that I said he wouldn't do it when he just did it. Right. As for his claims on the election, I was skeptical. I was more skeptical of those claims in 2020 when I went on Fox News and criticized Sydney, the Kraken lady, whatever her name is, Sydney, I can't remember her last name, I'm sorry. But criticized the claim that voting machines were rigged. And I said, if they're rigged, where's the evidence? I was much more skeptical then than I am now, having seen a lot and talked to a lot of people in a lot of different countries. And I'm not speaking specifically of the 2020 election, I'm speaking of all elections in which the outcome is determined by electronic voting machines. They can't be trusted. There's no reason to have electronic voting machines. And by the way, California, my home state, has electronic voting machines and they don't get the results for a week or more. So obviously they're not more efficient.
Let me stop you there. I mean, can you say publicly now that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election?
Well, I guess what I'm saying to you is I'm not sure that he did. I actually am much more open to what he said.
He lost the election. He lost the 2020 election.
You can say that. I mean, of course, he did lose the election. He was out of office, and Joe Biden took took the presidency. But what I'm saying is I have much less confidence now, based on a lot more information, in our system of voting than I had then. And I do think that so Democrats were incited because they were like, well, you're calling into question the legitimacy of Biden's presidency. Okay, I understand that. It's partisan. But if you take 3 steps back, a system where people don't believe that the outcome can be trusted or is real is a terrible system by definition. So why do you have electronic voting machines? Like, what's the answer?
There were over 60 court cases. There were 60 court cases. You know these numbers. No.
Well, I actually don't know the numbers because I've never really argued this in public, and I've never been that interested. But I'm interested in the future of the country. And I have never received a straight answer to a simple question, which is, why do we have electronic voting machines? I've covered a lot of elections in a lot of different countries.
I mean, there were over 60 court cases in which the judges, even appointed by Trump and the Republicans, concluded that there was no widespread fraud. But you still haven't answered the question. Do you believe that Trump lost the 2020 election?
Oh, let me answer it more precisely. I don't know. If you'd asked me this in 2020, I would have said, yeah, he lost.
He lost the popular vote. He lost the Electoral College. He lost everything.
If I could just finish. Now, okay, but I've spent a lot of my life in other countries, as I know you have too. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of electronic voting fraud that takes place around the world. And you get that from both sides. Like, that is widely acknowledged, and you know this. That's why people die their thumbs after they vote.
It didn't happen in the States in 2020. It didn't happen.
Okay, but I guess what I'm saying is, just to be super precise about it, and I'm obviously not carrying water for Trump, I'm saying it could have happened. And it could have happened in 2024, and it could happen in 2028.
But it didn't happen.
Okay, but why would we take the risk? Why would we even want to have this conversation? Why wouldn't we just want to eliminate all doubt? I mean, it's like saying, if your wife's like, I'm going to go sleep at some dude's house, but I'm not having sex with him. Trust me. You're like, how about don't sleep at his house? Then we don't have to have the argument, right? Like, why even take the risk?
Part of and then, so to be fair, so then in the same way that you're questioning 2020, what you're also saying then is that you would equally question if President Trump is the legitimate president, given your skepticism.
I'm definitely saying that. Let me be super clear. This is not a partisan observation, and we're all sort of caught in 2020 land where we have to pretend that, there were no undercover feds at J6 or all this stuff. We all have to make these, we're still stuck in the past. But I'm saying going forward, this is very corrosive to a society. It makes an actual democracy impossible. By the way, it makes the richest people more powerful. They're powerful enough. Just get rid of it. Let's get back to the system that normal countries use, like France, where you just vote and it's tallied and your thumb gets dyed. You can't vote twice, and everyone has confidence in the system. We don't have to listen to any of these debates anymore.
What's corrosive is that you're saying that you don't believe the electoral system of the United States in 2020. I mean, don't you think that what you're saying is really damaging to our democracy?
That's why I'm saying it, because it is so damaging to our democracy to have these doubts that could be eliminated instantly by a simple technological change. And the fact that no one wants to do that is an indication to me that both sides see an advantage in corruption. And you know that that's true because that's how the system actually works. Corruption is never really addressed because everybody gets a piece. That's why there's so much corruption in this world. And electoral corruption is no different from any other kind of corruption. And I'm saying, as someone who's not getting a piece of anything, let's just get rid of this and have an honest system that we don't need to worry about.
I mean, I see I spend a lot of time like both of you, traveling the country, talking to voters, a lot of Republican voters as well. And I see the doubt, and this mistrust that you keep talking about constantly. Yeah. But I also do think, Tucker, though, a lot of it has to do with a lot of folks in the Republican Party. I'm not necessarily talking about you right now, that are constantly sort of regurgitating, particularly this new idea. No, it's not new, but this other false notion that feeds into this idea that everything is rigged, which has to do with immigrants. And immigrants are out there sort of illegally altering the American electoral system, to the point that Reuters did a study not too long ago, and it found that over 80% of Republicans truly believe that immigrants are fraudulently casting ballots, which is also factually incorrect. Right. No, that is completely factually incorrect. And so you are someone too, particularly during your days at Fox News, that were out there, I think, invoking the idea indirectly, to your credit, indirectly, that immigrants were interfering with the American process, knowing that perhaps Democrats were intentionally allowing for, quote, mass migration in order to get these immigrants to vote for them. All of this is factually incorrect. And so,
well, the question is then why? So immigration as a response to labor markets has always been, and this is not the only country with immigration tensions, and it's not just white countries that have immigration tensions. Kenya has terrible immigration tensions because there are a lot of Somalis in Kenya. South Africa has terrible, violent reactions to the number of Zimbabweans in South Africa. Why are those immigrants there? For jobs. So this is a universal thing. Mexico, as you both know, has terrible immigration problems. This is like a human problem.
Of course.
So my question was, on the eve of technological revolution with AI, where labor will basically become valueless, where normal people like you and me won't even have jobs, why would you import tens of millions of new low-skilled laborers? And of course, it doesn't make any sense from an economic perspective at all. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing like that's ever happened. So there must be another reason for it. And my guess was, and it may be untrue, there may be an even farther out reason for it, but that to pack the electoral system. But maybe that's wrong.
That's not
But
true.
it doesn't
Right,
change the
I
fact
guess
that we have way too much immigration and it makes the country unstable. That is true in every single country in which this is happening in the world, regardless of the race or religion of the people who live there. It's true in Jordan with the Palestinians. It's true in Egypt. You know, it's like true everywhere.
Yeah, but undocumented immigrants don't vote massively. Undocumented immigrants don't vote massively. They didn't change the results of the 2020 election. That is not true. I mean, we have no evidence of that whatsoever.
Well, I'm not asserting that it is true. I'm just saying I'm making some more general nonpartisan observations. One is that you need to have in a representative democracy total confidence or strong confidence from the public that the system is real, okay? Electronic voting machines will never provide that confidence because nobody trusts technology. Your phone is literally listening to you in your bedroom. That's not crackpot stuff, it's a fact. So in that world, why would you have electronic voting machines? Well, of course you wouldn't, so we should get rid of them. Second, immigration can be great. Immigration past a certain point makes your society unstable because it's too much change. And in our society, that's definitely true. And I could name a half a dozen or a dozen other countries around the world in which it's true. It's always true. And because we're so caught up in our own thing in America, we're like, oh, it's racism, whatever. It's like, maybe it's racism, but
I
this is
wasn't
hardly the
even
most
going there.
racist country in the world.
As you know. I think that's also debatable. But what I was actually trying to get, I was literally putting the immigration debate to a side. Because we can do like 5 hours just on that. But I was just
right.
I was just pointing the damage that even invoking something that's factually incorrect can have in the Republican electorate. To the point that people are out there.
Is it the Republican electorate, though? I'm against the Republican. Like, I just want to be clear. I would never vote Republican, period, okay? As long as they're slaves to a foreign power.
You can talk to Republicans right now, and many of them will tell you, no, undocumented immigrants are voting. And to be clear, so our listeners understand, it is illegal for undocumented immigrants to vote in state and federal elections. And just like every other survey out there has found that when instances do happen, which they have, incredibly, it's very sporadic. It's less than 0.001%. Like, that is true.
Well, we don't actually know that because in states where there's no ID requirement, there's no way to know, no matter how many studies you commission. So we can't actually know that. And I don't know that. But I know that if you drop all safeguards, you're likely to get what you were previously trying to prevent. So if there's no security guard at the mall,
we
you're
have
going to
no
have more
evidence of
shoplifting.
that it happened here in the United States, Tucker.
I'm merely saying, if you take voting seriously, and I do, or did,
We do, yeah.
then you would do everything you could to make certain that it was honest.
Yeah, but we cannot blame the immigrants for that. We cannot blame the immigrants. Anyway,
I'm actually not blaming the immigrants. I'm blaming the state legislatures that have banned voter ID. That the immigrants didn't do that. The state legislators did it. And the question is why. But I would just say this. We're still caught up in kind of our partisan thinking on this from the 2020 election. If you thought that Trump became president in this last cycle, and I'm not alleging this at all, but it's not crazy to think that, yes, there were in fact changes to vote totals in just a small number of zip codes that could actually turn a presidential election. I mean, if you look at the math on an election, a national election, it's not that complicated, really. If you thought that, then we'd be back to where we were in 2015, where the main people complaining about voter fraud were Democrats. Like, I'm 57, so I remember that.
bringing up that suspicion is completely wrong. I mean, I haven't met a single
It's not completely wrong.
undocumented immigrant who voted in the last elections here in the United States.
Well,
They're
I
not
wasn't talking
interested
about
in
illegals. I was talking about Americans, and I'm getting back to the electronic voting machine question, which I think is really, really important. And I hope that we don't find out someday how important it is, because so much power is apportioned by national elections. Like, literally control of the biggest military in the world winds up in the hands of the person who wins. So the stakes are very, very high. And both parties have alleged voter fraud in the last 15 years. I've seen it. And maybe they're both right. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, right?
Okay, so let me stick into the immigration arena just for a little bit longer. One, I think it's incredibly clear, anyone that has been following you the last year, that you are morally outraged by what's happening in Iran and in Gaza. Now, I think the images speak for themselves. You're constantly talking about the innocent mothers and children that are being killed in Gaza, in the same way that you've used this language to describe the intervention in Iran, which you've described as evil, and disgusting. And as a Christian, even, when you think of the interior of the United States, is there anything happening here that you also find equally morally unjustifiable? And things that come to my mind, for instance, ICE detaining over 500 babies, 50 migrants dying in ICE under this administration, the American citizens, not immigrants, the American citizens being held by ICE erroneously. Where do you sort of draw your own moral lines?
Well, the main crime still is the treatment of the American Indians who are from here, and we've never gotten that right. And if there's anyone who deserves our sympathy and who receives so little of it because they never complain, because they're Indians, they don't believe in complaining, but it's the American Indians. That's how I feel. And they're also, by the way, just pretty impressive people by and large. Yeah. So I know a lot of them. Okay, so there's that.
Okay.
I don't think we should ever treat anyone inhumanely. I don't believe in the death penalty, but as long as we have the death penalty, I think death row inmates ought to be able to smoke a cigarette before they get killed, because if they want to. I don't think you should ever shame people. As a Christian, I just think it's wrong, right? There's no comparison in effect or thematically between the treatment of the Palestinians in land that they've occupied since the beginning of recorded history and people who came here at the urging of white liberal politicians illegally and are receiving really limitless benefits, which is a fact. And the people who pay for everything.
That's not a fact.
It is a fact.
No, it isn't. I mean,
Okay. All right. Well, in any case, I'm saying people who were not allowed to come here, who were sold on the idea that they could come here anyway by the Biden administration and the Bush administration before them, and basically every administration going back to 1965 has allowed immigrants to come here illegally and done nothing about it. I feel sorry for them. I've never been mad at the immigrants. I'm mad at the people who created all this human misery. I noticed no one ever mentions all the rapes that take place on the way from the Guatemalan border to Tijuana.
Oh, I've been there. I've seen it, but I will also tell you that I've spent a lot of time
that constantly. Yes,
right.
And
so
that happened
so much human
during the Trump
that
administration.
takes place. When you have mass migration, when you have huge numbers of people moving, especially by foot, you're going to get a lot of people killed, starving, dying of dehydration, and getting raped and robbed. And all of this has happened because a bunch of American politicians, most of them white liberals, I'm just saying, just to deracialize it, have said, come on in. And as usual, the immigrants are the pawns in all of this. But the fact is, with AI, right there, eliminating jobs for the American upper middle class destroying the knowledge economy, we are facing a true disaster within our borders. What are all these people going to do? They came here looking for a better life. They're not going to get one. A lot of people who were born here or went to college here are deeply in debt because they bought into our stupid system. Those people are not going to have jobs. So what happens then? And I don't see anybody who seems to care at all. But I care because I see a catastrophe in the making.
Yeah, but it is wrong to suggest that they're replacing Americans. The fact is that
they're literally replacing Americans.
No, they're not.
They're wrong. It's a math question. No. What percentage of live births are to women who are born outside our borders.
No,
I mean,
they're doing,
it's not an
as you
attack
know,
on those women. It's just like, it's called
they're doing
demographics.
the jobs that
It's a
nobody else
math
wants to
question.
do. They're doing the jobs that nobody else
Those
wants
are
to do.
two separate
They
questions.
help
They're
us.
absolutely.
They help us through the pandemic. They taking care of our kids. Whatever you had for breakfast, they did it. I mean, they produce it.
I
so-
made my own breakfast, but everything you're saying has truth
But
in it.
not-
I'm not denying that. They
not
also
exactly
work really
what you
hard, and a lot of them are good Christians, and they're nice people, and like you could say a lot about illegal immigrants, a lot that's good, okay? And I wouldn't not say that. I'm merely saying that as a math question, they are definitely replacing people who are born in the United States. I'm not sure it's their fault, but that is happening, and you must know it's happening because you've got internet access and you can look at the numbers. So these are huge changes that have never taken place in any society in peacetime in all history that I'm aware of. And there are a lot of people, and with respect to you have been one of them, Jorge, who are like, no, shut up, you can't notice that or say it. Well, I'm going to because it's a fact.
No, but we live in a diverse society. I mean, it's true, according to the Census Bureau, in 2045, everyone's going to be a minority. The white population is going to be a minority, and this would be a majority minority country. That's the country where I came. That's the country that I love. That's the country that I want to defend.
It's not the country I was born in. And as someone who was born here,
it's changing slowly, but we have to accept that.
It's not changing slowly. It's changing very quickly, and it's changing because of decisions that people have made to change
What's
it.
wrong with those
So
changes?
it's
I mean, why don't you want a minority country?
That's a separate debate. The question is, are you allowed? You began this conversation by saying Americans are not being replaced by immigrants, and they are. So why are you
But what do
trying
you
to
mean by that?
discourage
Just
people?
when you say
physically
replace, do you mean
replaced?
jobs or do you mean?
No. I mean in terms of total population. So in 50 years, what percentage of the population will have parents who lived here during the Civil War? Well, it'll be a small minority of people. So the country changes. If Mexico
Absolutely. Yeah, there's
became
demographic changes
minority
happening.
Mexican in 60 years, people would say, and it became
Sure.
like, I don't know, half
And
Indian,
what's-
people would be like, what about the Mexico that I grew up in? And I
But
don't
I
think
guess
any
that's my
person would
question.
say
What-
you're a racist for saying
what
that.
is
Because
the
why wouldn't you say
America-
that?
Sure, and I think this is what's interesting, right? Like the version that you have of what America's supposed to look like is very different, say, than the version that I grew up in, like with my dad who's an immigrant and my mom who's Cuban, right? Like the America that I grew up in is one in which this sort of demographic change, which is one that is very different from the last time both of you talked, right? Like now we're talking about the fact that there's over 20 million people that lived in mixed status families, right? So U.S. citizens that are living with immigrants, and like that is the reality. So I guess I'm really curious to understand, like, what about that image?
I'll tell you,
Like
I'll be
scares you, or
precise
what
about
don't
it.
you like about that? Yeah,
I think it's far more than 20 million. The administration
I'm
says
saying
it's
in mixed
50
status families.
Yeah, right. So what I care about, and I've always cared about, is not skin color. I've never cared about that, despite claims to the contrary.
You did call immigrants that you did say that they make things dirtier at some point. You were quoted saying,
I meant it because I look at the state that I grew up in, California.
That's a terrible
which
thing
when
to
I
say.
was a
That is
child,
not true.
no, I was there, okay, was by far the cleanest, most functional state with the best public schools, the lowest poverty rate in the country, and now it's the opposite. And now it is also
so
physically
you
dirty.
think immigrants are making cities dirtier?
I think the chaos of rapid demographic change worsens life for everyone. And that is true, again, in Jordan,
It is not
in
true.
South
Immigration
Africa.
is a net positive to the economy into this country.
You can repeat, okay, but the economy, whatever that means, I don't know how you're measuring that, is one way to determine reality. Okay, but there are many other measures.
Okay, you're asking for facts. According to the Congressional Budget Office, immigrants will contribute almost $9 trillion to the GDP in 10 years. That's the contribution,
Well,
right?
I think I've spent my life in Washington, so I'm a little more jaded about those numbers, but without getting into why I'm jaded, let me just say
9
that there are
trillion,
other
7 trillion
measures.
is just
because
incredible. Go ahead.
You're quite an enthusiastic capitalist, I notice. I'm not. What I care about is how people live. And if you wake up in a country where people are penalized for saying what they think is true, if free speech is no longer sacrosanct, which it should be, if you live in a country where basic services are unattainable, where the average home price for a starter home in 100 American cities is over $1 million, then you're looking at the effects of massive and abrupt demographic change and of population growth. There are too many people in the country. I don't care if every one of them is a Nobel laureate. crowding is bad. It's bad in Mexico City. It's bad in New York City. It's bad in Bengal. It's bad in Peshawar. It's always the same, okay? So like the America is not more stable. It's not richer, sorry. It's not more united, and it's not freer than it was when I was a child. There are a lot of reasons for this, but immigration is one of them.
Yeah, but immigration, I mean, immigrants are not responsible for that. My impression, Tucker, is that you don't like
I'm not
a
blaming
diverse
immigrants.
America. The impression is that you...
Okay, you can say whatever you want.
No, it's just
I
my
don't care what the impression is.
that's
I'm
what
sitting right
asking.
here. I'll tell you what I think.
Yeah,
Okay,
please
so
go ahead.
the impression is maybe justified that I'm a bad person or whatever. You can decide.
I'm going there.
But part of this is like a decade-long propaganda campaign against me, and that's just a fact. So let me just explain what I think. I'm not a particularly racially aware person. It's not at the top of my list of concerns. There are racial differences. That is real. They're physical differences. Okay, but I've never really
What do you
cared
mean
that much
by
about
that?
that.
Sorry, because when you say
What do you mean? Because people look different of different races, so like they're not exactly the same. But I don't really. First of all, I don't know what we can do about that. Second, as a Christian, I sincerely truly believe that God created every single person with identical moral value to him. So that's kind of the great equalizer from my perspective. What I care about is your country getting better? And ours is not. And there are, again, a bunch of different reasons. Technology is a huge reason. The decision of our ruling class to offshore American manufacturing is another. The decision by a ruling class, not by immigrants, not by the people of Oaxaca didn't vote. The Congress voted. The people in charge did this. So I've never been an immigrant blamer. I'm a leadership blamer because they're the ones who did it. And all of those changes have made this a worse country. And I know that because I've been here.
But maybe the difference with us, Tucker, is that we believe the opposite. We believe that immigrants are making this country much, much better than before. And
is there a downside, do you see, to mass immigration?
Absolutely. I mean, I think in the sense that we have a government that has completely dismantled, for instance, or has not ever come up with a humane immigration system.
the cruelty with which they are treated.
With an immense amount of cruelty. But I do think, look, I think by many measures, economic measures, cultural measures, by the amount of immigrants, Latinos that are now in both Republican and Democrats and libertarians that are now in these incredible positions of powers. I mean, it's very hard for me to hear you say things that
so I'm not a racist, so I don't see.
But that's a racist comment. That is a racist comment.
No, the racist comment would be to say I'm thrilled that there are Latinos in office. I don't care if there are Latinos in office because I'm not a racist. So
but
I don't
in the
care
same
what
way that
color
people
they
call
are.
you anti-Semitic, and you get very upset when people call you anti-Semitic.
I don't get
it's
upset.
like
I'm over it. I don't see, but so that's not how my brain works. I don't care if there are Latinos in office. It doesn't interest me at all. I care if there are good people in office. So it's not a win to get Latinos in office. Like, I don't even get that line of thinking because I don't care about Latinos as Latinos. I care about people as people. And the people who are born in this country, and I'm one of them, look out at a country that is half as functional and half as happy as it once was, and are trying to figure out what happened. And I know that like Apple and Microsoft will tell you for hours about how GDP is up. That's irrelevant to most people. So that kind of like capitalism justifies all attitude is one of the reasons that we're here. People worship money. And so even as like their lives get worse and they don't know their neighbors, you're like, oh, GDP is up. Everything is fine. That is not an adequate answer for me. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Let me. We can discuss immigration for hours. So let me
10 hours, yeah.
Let me put that aside. Let me move into something more recent. Two New York Times reporters say that Vice President JD Vance considered recruiting you to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime girlfriend and confidant. The idea, obviously, was to exonerate Trump from any wrongdoing. Can you confirm that?
No, I can't confirm. I mean, recruit me. I've tried.
Did they ask you to do that interview?
No, no, they didn't ask me to do that. I asked the Department of Justice under Donald Trump. I asked the Department of Justice under Joe Biden, identically, to interview Ghislaine Maxwell and a lot of other people who are in prison. So I have tried to set up a whole bunch of prison interviews, including with Ghislaine Maxwell, who I would interview this afternoon if I could, and I'd be delighted to do that. So, of course, I would never whitewash. I I criticized Trump immediately.
Did you discuss that with Vice President JD Vance?
No.
So how come he suggested that at the Situation
I don't
Room
know
when they
that
were
I don't know what he suggested. I mean, I don't know, like JD Vance is who I love, by the way, just to be clear, but I never attempted to whitewash anything Trump did. I think I was the first person on the right to criticize Trump last July for not releasing all Epstein-related documents and for lecturing any of his voters who wanted to see them. In fact, I gave that speech at Turning Point with Charlie Kirk standing right next to me twice in one day, and you can pull the tape. It's on Twitter. It's absurd to think that I was playing along with some cover-up. I mean, obviously it's absurd. And I know a lot of people who are involved with Jeffrey Epstein. I know Jeffrey Epstein's brother. I've been on this story for a long time. I know one of the women who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein. I know a lot about this story. I'm not an expert, but I know more than most people. And I think there's a lot there, and most of it's not about sex. So I have been pushing this story since he was murdered in federal detention. And he was murdered with the knowledge of, clearly, at least after the fact knowledge of the Attorney General.
Epstein was murdered?
Jeffrey Epstein was murdered in prison.
So he didn't commit suicide?
No, he did not commit suicide.
But how do you know that then?
Well, because I spent like a year on the topic, actually did this whole investigation for Fox News, which apparently nobody saw and everyone ignored. But I mean, how much time do you have?
No, tell us.
But who killed him then?
Well, I believe he was killed by another inmate. But of course you can't get the names of the 11 other men on his cell block. So he was in federal lockup in the secure wing in Manhattan. And clearly, his previous cellmate, he said, tried to kill him. Then he was alone, and then the cameras, for some reason, were turned off, and the two guards who were supposed to be watching were asleep. And clearly one of the other inmates killed him. And we know this for a bunch of different reasons, including the fact that somebody dressed him in different clothes before bringing him down to the prison infirmary.
But I'm sorry, there's no evidence of this, right?
Oh, it's definitely evidence of it, for sure, because the story that they are telling
that's
is
not
inconsistent.
The official story, no?
No, the official story is that he hung himself with a bed sheet. But the medical examiner who was hired by his brother, who was in the autopsy, said conclusively, having done autopsies on suicide victims in prison throughout New York State for 40 years, that this guy was strangled. That is not a ligature mark consistent with being hung. That is someone being strangled with the cord to his CPAP machine. Meanwhile, the medical examiner who wrote the official report concluded that it was, quote, inconclusive. I mean, if you're interested in this, there's an awful lot of responsible reporting on this topic, and I could go on for hours. But the point is, it was obvious to me that he was murdered. It was obvious to me that Trump's attorney general knew he was murdered and that he lied about it. And I've said that in public many times. He's threatened to sue me, and I hope he does, because I'd love to go through discovery on that. That is the beginning of the actual scandal. Jeffrey Epstein was indicted federally in August of 2019 for the same crimes he'd been convicted of in Florida in 2006. Why did they do that? Well, to get him back from France. And they arrested him at Teterboro Private Airport in New Jersey. He goes directly to detention. A month later, he's dead. Why? Well, it's very obvious to me, and I'm not the only person who thinks this, trust me, that he was, this was done with the knowledge of governments,
so then
including the U.S. government.
So what do you think about the way the White House has been handling the Epstein Files?
I couldn't think less of it. I mean, it's been a disaster for them, and rightly so.
When you talk to the president about this, what is he? I can only assume.
I have talked to him. Right,
and what is he? What do you tell him?
I said, I don't know why, after campaigning on this, you just don't release everything. I said to him, and I believe this now, I think I don't see Trump like touching little kids. I just don't get that vibe off him at all. I could be wrong. I've often been wrong. But I don't think that Trump is exposed on the sex stuff. I think there may be other things, but I can't prove it, so I'm not going to say it. But I never thought that. So I said to Trump, I don't understand. What's the problem with releasing this stuff? And he goes into this whole talk, which he said in public almost verbatim. This is a trap. It's like Russiagate. My enemies are trying to get me. And I couldn't see it. I just couldn't see it. I still can't see it. I think there are other things that are preventing it. But either way, I think it's been a true disaster. It's shaken faith in Trump's his core promise, which was to drain the swamp, to end corruption, to bring sunlight to what has been hidden. You know, we have like over 1 billion classified federal documents. So we can't really say we have a democracy because we don't know what the federal government is doing because they're hiding it from us. And we're paying for it. So like the whole system is so completely out of control. It will never be fixed until there's disclosure. And the great tragedy for me is not just the war in Iran, but the failure to bring disclosure. They haven't even released all the Kennedy assassination files. Like, what is that? So anyway, whatever. I don't want to turn this into a bitch fest, but yeah, that makes me upset.
What does it feel like now when the president, who you still deeply admire, insults you? I mean, now suddenly he said, it doesn't get to you ever. I mean, he said, obviously, particularly given after everything you've said about Iran, he said, you know, that you've lost your way, that you're not smart enough, that you're part of these losers, nut jobs. Does that get to you ever?
No. I mean, first of all, I never admired Trump. I always liked Trump. I thought Trump was tough. Trump is tough. So actually, let me revise that. Yes, I do admire Trump's toughness.
Okay.
You know, I talked to Trump on his way to get arrested the first time. He was literally in the car on the way to get arrested. And he called me and I said, "How are you doing?" He's like, "I'm great." I said, "You're getting arrested and you're great?" And he says, almost exactly, he says, "Well, I'm getting arrested. I have no choice but to be great." So I admire a man who can keep his emotions under control, who can put a smile on his face in a moment of crisis. Like, I do admire that. But no, I don't take it personally. And by the way, I'm not insecure about, I'm stupid. I'm a nut. Maybe I am a bit of a nutcase. I think that's not totally out of left field. But I don't feel stupid. No one's ever called me stupid. I'm not. If he'd said, you know, you're getting kind of fat, I'd be like, oh, now you're hurting my feelings, you know, because that might be a little true. But
I won't comment on that, but do you ever fear any type of retribution, right? Obviously, we know that the administration is going after Governor Newsom and his wife. Governor Newsom has said that perhaps it has to do with the fact that he's been very critical of the president. Do you fear that kind of retribution, or do you feel safe?
Well, I'm not afraid of him or anyone else.
You're not.
I mean, I sort of understand that when you, because I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
You know, when you stand up and insult people or tell the truth about what they're doing, and they have more power than you, no matter who it is.
Yeah.
You're gonna suffer for it. I mean, that's why people don't do it, right? So, but I'm not worried. I mean, I kind of know how it works. I got fired with the highest rated show in cable television. They fired me anyway. So like I'm not whining, by the way, at all. But I understand how the system works. But I am, 57. So at a certain point, you have to think, well, why do I care? Like, what's more important than telling the truth?
Sometimes, Tucker, there seems to be like a contradiction between what you really thought about Trump and what you said about him in public. In a text from January 4, 2021, reported by the BBC, you were quoted as saying about Trump, "I hate him passionately." I think you corrected that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've explained this a million times, but that's actually, that's such an interesting story that will never be told. But like, how did my private text get into the New York Times? But anyway, it did. Yeah. And I was enraged at Trump during the recount. And there were personal reasons that I was mad at Trump, which are not interesting enough to repeat. But I felt like I was screwed over by someone who works for him, and I was texting my producer about it, and I was enraged by his selfishness, I guess, particularly after January 6th, when all these people got in trouble and he did nothing to help the people who had helped him. I mean, I believe in loyalty, and I think it goes both ways. So I mean, there were times when I was highly frustrated by Trump, and there were times when I wasn't. But in general, I always liked Trump. And I still do. I mean, if you've never, had a drink with Trump or had dinner with Trump, I mean, it's quite
I don't think you would have a drink with my dad.
I don't think he ejected me from a press conference.
I think my dad is on some list.
I don't agree with that, actually. It's funny. The more you criticize Trump in a weird way, the more he seeks to win you over. So he gets elected. Who's the first person he meets with?
Well, I mean, I
was
tried
Justin Trudeau.
to get an interview for over a decade and cannot even pass the
just call him up and say, I'd love to, I'm down here. I'm 30 miles south. I'd love to come up and have dinner. He'll probably do it. And you will like him no matter how much you'd be like, oh, I disapprove. You will have fun yes, you will. Trust me. You can't help it. And you'll maybe hate yourself, but you will have fun.
I think Paola has the last question.
Yeah, no, so obviously, I'm a journalist, my dad's a journalist. What I love about this podcast is that I get to, as I have my whole life, learn a lot from my father. And I also know that your father was a journalist, Tucker.
Yes.
And so I'm curious now, what lessons, particularly about truth-telling, do you still hold from your dad?
Oh, man, he was brave.
Yeah.
He was like a legit brave person. It didn't always serve his interest, but he was. The three things I loved about my father, he's the kindest person, he passed last year, but that I ever knew, was he was completely fearless, like truly fearless. I saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
I think every kid thinks, my dad's the bravest. And I came away thinking he really was the bravest. He was extremely well-read. He never stopped reading, never stopped learning, never stopped talking. He was very engaged intellectually. He was very smart. I really admire that. And the third thing that I loved about him was he never lost his sense of humor under any circumstance. He always had perspective on himself. And I think it's so important for men, particularly as they get older, to just remember how absurd they are. And it's easy to forget that, especially when, you're kind of successful and everyone's kissing your butt and you're so great and da-da-da-da. It's like important to remember, like, I'm kind of a joke, actually. You know what I mean? I'm kind of lumpy and furry and I make bad decisions and I think I know, but I don't. Like, it's just important to laugh at yourself or else you become utterly foolish and contemptible and self-serious. And
Your laugh has gone viral. That is...
There
That
are
is
well,
memes
it's
about
mostly at myself. Like, I'm actually, I'm really trying to laugh at myself. Like, especially,
I know.
That's one of the last thing I'll say. Like, the thing about Trump, feeling so betrayed by Trump, it's really important for me to be honest about the ways in which I was wrong. It's too easy to always blame other people and be like, it's all your fault and you totally changed because the Israelis were threatening to kill you, which, by the way, may be true, but it's still my fault for not being wiser or more honest with myself. So I think that's an important process to continue for all of us all the time.
Yeah.
Tucker, thanks so much for this conversation. Even though we don't agree on almost anything, I really
that's
appreciate
not
it.
true, Jorge. I feel in you deep kinship. I know you secretly agree.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you
Gracias,
so
Tucker.
much, Tucker.
Gracias.
Truly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See
All
ya.
right.
All right, Dad. So this was the first time in 8 years that you got to talk to Tucker again.
Yeah, we used to talk a lot when he was at Fox News, and he invited me to debate immigration. And it's really interesting because when it comes to immigration, I mean, you had an incredible exchange with him. He's still the same, no? It is very clear that he's blaming immigrants for some of the problems that we have here in the United States, and we see it in a different way. But it's I'm not going to say it's a different Tucker than the one I remember, but much more relaxed. He says that he's not making as much money as he was before. And he said a couple of things that I was really surprised about Jeffrey Epstein, that he
Like
killed
what?
himself,
Oh, yeah.
that he didn't kill himself, that he was killed. I hadn't heard that before. That's a conspiracy theory. There's no evidence whatsoever, but he's clearly much more relaxed. What's your impression?
Yeah, I mean, I think seeing anchors unscripted, it is always refreshing, right? And I think you probably feel the same way. And I think for years, Tucker had a teleprompter, not only a teleprompter, but also certain talking points, that were very particular to Fox News, the Republican Party. So I do think that's why not just you and I, but suddenly like millions of other Americans are kind of shocked, to see Tucker Carlson say the word genocide, that there's a genocide in Gaza. And so I think part of the shock is that this is kind of like an unfiltered Tucker Carlson. And so I think many things are interesting. I think his you can't really pin him down, right? Like it's hard for me to sort of make sense of what his core values are today. Well, because I think there's this clear distance, obviously, that he has with Trump, and all of it has to do with this moral outrage that he feels towards Gaza and towards Iran, and obviously towards the killing of the thousands of people that have been killed, and particularly in Gaza. But then when you're asking about sort of his his moral framing in the United States. No, that's when things start to get a little bit murky. He didn't really answer the question around the inhumanity that we're seeing here in the United States when it comes to immigrants. But to your point, it's kind of a new Tucker that always reverts back to this kind of core principle that holds MAGA together, which is the Great Replacement theory. And the way in which Tucker and many are really frightened, about this idea of demographic
we are
change.
replacing Americans, no?
And that's very real. It is the fear of cultural replacement was the driving force of Trump's rise in 2016, as it was in 2024.
Right? We see it differently, obviously. We think this is a diverse country, that immigrants are contributing enormously to the economy and to the society and to the moral fiber of this country. And he doesn't see it, I think. He doesn't see that. I think he's going to make news when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein and the fact that, according to his version, JD Vance, the vice president, didn't approach him to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime girlfriend. I think it's the first time, or maybe one of the first times in which he makes a reference to that, because that was widely reported by the New York Times.
Right, and I think that is also a reflection of kind of what I found was these inconsistent answers around his relationship with the Trump administration. Right, on the one hand, he does admire President Trump. On the other hand, he has been insulted by Trump, although he says that he doesn't really care about the criticism. And so I can't really tell.
I couldn't either.
How betrayed he feels or not. And I think, go ahead.
Sometimes I don't know if he admires him, and sometimes I don't know if he despises him. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Even after an hour of conversation, I'm not sure.
Yeah, me neither. We'll see if the president has anything to say in reaction to this. Now, what is clear, though, he seems to think that you would be invited by the president to the White House to have dinner or lunch.
He was wrong. He was wrong again. I was ejected in 2015 from a press conference, and since then, I haven't been able to get close to Donald Trump. Anyway, if Trump wants to talk, we'll do it, right?
Absolutely. No, we would love to talk to Trump. But look, I think the
invitation is open.
It is. And I think some of our listeners sometimes question, rightly so, why we have conversations with certain people that at times regurgitate, for instance, the big lie that we heard Tucker Carlson once again regurgitating an iteration of the big lie. Which only has one intention, and that is to sow doubt and paranoia among the electoral system. So I think it's really important for us to say it here very clearly. Donald Trump did not win the 2020 election. Undocumented immigrants do not vote. It is illegal for undocumented immigrants to vote in state and federal elections, and so it's very important to repeat that. But that, it's still good. It's good to have these conversations because Tucker Carlson has millions of followers that are listening to him every day, and so we need to listen to him as well.
And at the end, I think we ask the right questions. But tell us what you think on our social media. Yeah.
Así es.
Okay, Paola.
Okay.
Listo.
Okay. Nos vemos.
Bye.
Bye.
Vamos a ver the World Cup.
Yeah.
Es lo único que estoy pensando, el fútbol. ¿Dónde está el siguiente partido? Bueno, bye.
Okay, bye.
The Moment is a production of Radio Ambulante Studios in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network. Our staff includes Daniel Alarcón, Laura Rojas Aponte, Lisa Cerda, Ana Bretón, and Allison Brennan with help from Diego Corso, Paola Leán, Natalia Ramírez, and Elsa Liliana Ulloa. The CEO of Radio Ambulante Studios is Carolina Guerrero. Executive producers at iHeart are Leo Gomez and Arlene Santana. Pablo Cabrera, Dylan Unger, and Mark Catton also serve as producers. Sound design, final mix, and theme song by Elias Gonzalez. Our hosts are Jorge Ramos and Paola Ramos. If you like this episode, please share the word. Recommend The Moment to anyone who might enjoy unpacking these complicated times with us. You can also follow us on social at The Moment Ramos Pod. And if you listen to The Moment, pero también te gustan los podcasts en español, check out Radio Ambulante Studios, where shows Radio Ambulante, El Hilo, and Central are really worth a listen. I'm Miguel Santiago Colón. Thanks for listening.